Welcome to the Wife Stories YouTube channel. New video every day, and don't forget to subscribe. Here we go.
The morning light fell across her face in a way I'd never noticed before. It struck the small slope of her cheekbone and brightened the faint lines near her eyes. Lines I hadn't seen as anything but gentle traces of our shared life. Now I saw them as a roadmap to someone else, someone I no longer understood. The early sun outlined her every feature, and I stood there, near the bedroom door, watching her breathe as if she were a stranger in my bed. It was 6:03 a.m., and my heart thudded heavily in my chest. It should have felt like waking up next to my wife. Instead, I felt the distance of 1,000 miles between us. She opened her eyes. Anna. I simply took a slow breath, nodded to her in greeting, and walked toward the bathroom. My pulse roared in my ears. She murmured something that sounded like my name, but I said nothing back. In that echoing silence, I realized I'd crossed the threshold between suspicion and certainty. Before, I had only glimmers of doubt, schedules that didn't align, phone calls she took in hushed tones, the tension in her shoulders whenever I asked about her day. She always had half smiles and plausible excuses. Practice ran late, or I had to pick up some new equipment for the swimming center. Innocent words, so easily believed. Now there was no believing left in me. I turned on the shower and let the water drum against the tiles. My thoughts rose like steam, swirling around me. I'd done the research carefully. 3 steps, 3 cuts that would sever any possibility of trust. But this was no hot-blooded revenge. It was surgical, like how a doctor might remove a malignant growth. I needed to ensure every last vestige of hope was eradicated, that everyone, her family, our acquaintances, even the man who ruined it all, would understand the irrevocable cost of betrayal. My reflection in the mirror looked hollow. I studied my own eyes. I found no tears there. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. We met in my last year of college, Anna and I. I was a quiet kid from Ohio, majoring in management, comfortable with my small circle of friends. She was from Florida, a bright spirit who studied sports psychology and volunteered at the campus fitness center. The first time she smiled at me, it felt like the sun had broken through a constant Midwest overcast. She asked if I'd try her spin class. I remember stumbling with some excuse about an injured knee, not used to that kind of directness. She only laughed and said she was sure she could fix whatever was bothering me. We were married 3 years later. I used to love her energy. She never stopped moving, always practicing a new technique, trying a new form of exercise, or planning the next event at the swimming club. I thought we balanced each other out. She was the flame, I was the steady ground. And for a while, it worked. Until the last 6 months. That's when she joined a new facility with a high-profile head coach, Michael Stone, a name revered among local swimmers. He boasted national-level experience, commanded respect wherever he went, and apparently, that included my wife. I suspected something was off the moment she introduced me to him at a social gathering for the club staff. He stood a little too close, said her name with a bit too much warmth. The way her eyes flicked to him, brief but telling, made my gut twist. She insisted it was nothing. "He's just a mentor," she said. "He's really motivated to see me grow." I wanted to believe her. God knows I did. But her face looked different in that moment, the same way it did this morning in the sunlight, like I was seeing a side I'd never seen before. 2 weeks later, she started coming home late. Always the same reason. "We're working on expanding the program, exploring new training regimens. I can't just walk out on them." I understood that logic, told myself I was being paranoid. Then the phone calls began. She'd pick up in the other room, keep her voice low. If I walked in, she'd end the conversation abruptly. My heart pounded in suspicion, but she always had an answer, delivered with just enough exasperation to make me feel guilty for doubting her. But the nail in the coffin was a text message I glimpsed purely by accident. One Sunday afternoon, her phone buzzed on the kitchen table. I was about to go jogging. She was in the shower. The screen lit up, and there it was, Thinking about last night. Let's do it again soon. You were amazing. My brain short-circuited. My vision narrowed. I didn't open the phone. I just stared at those words, feeling everything inside me tear open. When she came out in a towel, I said nothing. I walked past her, my breath stuck in my throat. She didn't realize I'd seen a thing. Maybe a younger man would have shouted, demanded answers. But I felt a part of me turn to stone. That was the first step. I kept my calm and decided to cut away illusions. If there was a lie, I would unravel it meticulously. I visited a private investigator the next day. By the end of the week, I had pictures. Not just the meeting at a coffee shop, but leaving a downtown hotel. Their body language was unmistakable. His hand on her waist, her leaning into him. A snapshot capturing the moment they entered the elevator together. The time-stamp reading 7:42 p.m. They emerged nearly 3 hours later. Different expressions, her hair mussed, a flush across her cheeks, his grin all too smug. I wasn't just a husband betrayed. I was a man who'd invested trust, time, and love into a marriage that had become a masquerade. I had no intention of confronting her with nothing but anger. I wanted absolute finality. So I waited, planned. I placed hidden audio recorders in our bedroom, in the living room, wherever I felt they might speak freely. I found more, low voices in the late evening, coded remarks about the next session. Step by step, I built a case. And yes, I even performed a DNA test, because I recalled the night she told me, tears in her eyes, that she was pregnant, only to lose it a few weeks later. That moment had shattered me. Now I had to confirm whether I had been the father at all. The results, like everything else, slammed the door shut on any illusions. It had been Stone's child. And though she miscarried, the seed of betrayal was planted long before. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. 2 nights after seeing the text, I came home from a long day at the transport company. She was in the shower. My mind played and replayed the image of that message. You were amazing. I pictured her with him, not just as a fleeting thought, but in vivid detail, clothes peeled away, the flush on her skin, that same expression of satisfaction I used to believe was mine alone. An entire film reel of them behind that closed hotel door unspooled in my head. My stomach churned with revulsion, but my face remained stoic, because I had to see. I had to confirm, had to face the raw truth. So I opened the bedroom door, a crack, and listened for the sound of running water. Heart pounding, I stepped inside and found the phone on the nightstand. Guilt gnawed at me, but I had none of that naive trust left to keep me from looking. My fingers shook as I scrolled through her messages. She had them under a different contact name, but I recognized the pattern of discussion. Their words had that electric undercurrent, times, places, brief confessions of how they felt in each other's arms. A quick mention of the way you moaned turned my stomach to ice. I scrolled and scrolled, each line stabbing deeper. By the time I heard the water stop, I'd returned the phone to its place. She came out wrapped in a towel, steam curling around her shoulders. I looked at her with the neutral expression I'd been perfecting. She smiled at me, though it faltered when I didn't say anything. Instead, I lifted one corner of my mouth, a polite curve that had no real warmth in it, and stepped out of the room. She said something, my name, a question. I closed the door behind me. That was the first night I slept on the couch, though I told her it was because I had an early start and didn't want to disturb her. In truth, I couldn't share the same bed, not when my mind was full of images of her entangled with that arrogant, thick-shouldered trainer. I spent the night staring at the ceiling, arms folded over my chest, listening to the faint hum of the air conditioner. Every so often, I tried to close my eyes and imagine how I would approach the endgame. Confrontation was inevitable, but it had to be final. No half-confessions, no manipulations, no trembling admissions that begged for forgiveness. I wanted the unstoppable truth, something that would not just crush her excuses, but expose her to everyone who had once believed in her fidelity. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The day I witnessed their actual intimacy stands out in my mind with excruciating clarity. Part of me wanted to turn a blind eye. The other part insisted I see it, that I wouldn't rest until I'd witnessed exactly how deep her betrayal went. I followed her after she left our house in the afternoon, claiming a staff meeting at the pool. My private investigator was trailing her car, but I joined from a distance in my own. She parked in a hotel garage downtown, an upscale place with tinted glass doors and uniformed doormen. My heart hammered so loudly I thought I might pass out. But I forced myself to keep driving around the block, found a place to park, and waited. After 15 minutes, I entered the lobby, pretending to be a guest. My tie felt like a noose around my neck. The hotel staff barely glanced at me. It was busy with convention guests. I timed my steps carefully to find which elevator she'd taken. The PI had texted me the floor. I rode up in silence, noting the sleek gold mirrors of the elevator, the hush of soft classical music. My reflection looked drawn and pale. When I stepped off at the designated floor, a strange calm settled over me. This was the moment I would cross from assumption into horrifying fact. He must have opened the door for her, or she had a key. I don't know. I never saw. But I heard them, faintly at first, down the hall. My stomach churned. I heard laughter, a low voice, then a moan that made my blood run cold. It was Anna's voice, heavy with pleasure. My gut twisted, but I forced my feet forward. I stood outside the door, my ear nearly against the wood. A muffled thud, his deeper groan. I felt sickness rise in my throat, my hand trembling against the doorframe. I didn't break in. I didn't knock. Instead, I pressed the record button on my phone, capturing the audible proof of her betrayal. I was in a trance of cold logic. Gather the evidence. I let the recording run for a minute before stepping back. My hand shook so badly I almost dropped the phone. The corridor was dimly lit, plush carpet swallowing my footsteps as I walked away. I remember noticing a housekeeping cart near the elevator, the faint smell of disinfectant. Normal life continuing, while mine caved in on itself. I managed to exit the hotel and sink into the driver's seat of my car. The steering wheel felt alien under my palms. People passed by on the sidewalk, unsuspecting. They had no idea a man had just had his entire life shredded upstairs. I sat there, focusing on my breathing, trying to quell the surge of rage and heartbreak. That's when I realized how numb I'd become. It was as if something inside me had died, replaced by the quiet resolve to finish what must be done. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk days passed, and I built my arsenal. My new routine involved calmly greeting Anna in the morning, leaving for work, making calls to finalize the details. The private investigator delivered photos of them in the hotel hallway. The DNA test result arrived in a sealed envelope with my name on it. The audio recordings were stored and backed up in multiple places. Meanwhile, Anna continued playing the role of a wife who thought she was just clever enough to hide her transgressions. She still wore her wedding band, though sometimes she left it at home because it was uncomfortable at the pool. She kissed me on the cheek goodbye when she left for extra training sessions, not knowing that with every forced peck, she hammered another nail into the coffin of our marriage. I discovered that Michael Stone was not simply a philanderer, but also had a record of questionable behavior. Nothing formally reported, but rumor had it he'd seduced a few women he coached, usually bored wives who found his confidence alluring. Anna had become just one more conquest. But the part that fascinated me most was how carefully she concealed it from her family, especially her father, a rigid man who prized family values above all else. One slip and her father would condemn her. Perhaps that fear drove her to be so secretive. Perhaps it was simply lust. It didn't matter anymore. The damage was done. With everything prepared, I decided the moment of truth would happen on a Friday evening. Her parents and sister would be in town for a small family gathering. I extended the invitation myself, feigning pleasantries, stating how nice it would be for everyone to get together for dinner. They agreed. Anna looked a bit surprised but said nothing. By then, my performance was flawless. She might have noticed my distance, but she likely attributed it to stress at work. On the appointed day, her father, John, her mother, Linda, and her younger sister, Becky, arrived in the late afternoon. Becky's fiancé canceled last minute, so she came alone. Their old uncle, William, tagged along as well, having driven up with them. William never liked me, though he never said it openly. He had a certain air of condescension that he wore like a suit. I served them all coffee in the living room. Anna tried to help, but I insisted she relax. There was a loaded tension in the air, though no one but me knew the reason. Once everyone was seated, I cleared my throat and said, "Thank you all for coming. There's something I'd like to share with you. It won't be easy to hear." Anna looked at me, eyes widening slightly, a hint of alarm. Her father frowned, set his coffee cup down. Linda shot a questioning glance at Anna, who appeared suddenly pale. I pressed play on my phone's recorded file. It started with an innocuous beep. Then a woman's voice, another staff member from the club, spoke in a breathy tone. "You two looked so good together. I've never seen such a sizzling connection." Everyone was talking about it. Then a moment of quiet. "Anna, you're glowing these days. He must be making you very happy." The clip ended with a click. My eyes never left Anna's face. She stared at the phone as though it had come to life. Her family exchanged baffled looks. Her father's eyes flicked from me to Anna. "What is this?" he asked, his voice rough. I answered in a calm monotone. "It's the voice of a friend congratulating my wife on her relationship with another man." Anna's lips parted, but no sound came out. I let the silence build, thick as smoke. "Not just any man," I added. "Michael Stone, her beloved head coach at the swimming center." The old uncle's mouth tightened. Becky covered her lips with one trembling hand. Anna's mother closed her eyes, shaking her head slightly. Her father's knuckles went white around his coffee cup. Anna just stared at the floor, tears forming. She looked so small in that moment, perched at the edge of the couch. She opened her mouth but apparently couldn't push the words out. I continued, voice measured. "I have proof. Photos, videos, audio recordings, even a DNA test from the pregnancy Anna mentioned last year." I paused, letting that land with devastating impact. Anna's face turned ashen. "It wasn't mine," I said. "Not that it matters now." The father inhaled sharply, fists clenching. The mother buried her face in her hands, shoulders shaking. Becky whispered something like, "Oh my God," through tears. Uncle William scowled but said nothing. Anna finally spoke, her voice cracking. "Ethan, please, let me." I cut her off with quiet coldness. "Don't lie. Don't bother trying to explain. The evidence is absolute." I turned to her family. "I brought you all here because you deserve to know. This wasn't a mistake or an accident. It was an ongoing affair behind my back, behind your backs." My gaze locked on Anna. "You took everyone's trust and shattered it." She stared at the floor, tears slipping down her cheeks. My anger was like a glacier, massive, unstoppable, yet disturbingly calm on the surface. Inside, I felt a subtle tremor, but outwardly, I was the embodiment of ice. Her father struggled to speak. "How long has this been going on?" His eyes bored into Anna, but she didn't respond. After a tense pause, I answered for her. "At least half a year, probably more." Anna's mother turned away, pressing trembling fingers to her mouth. Becky sniffled, tears rolling down her cheeks. "How could you?" she whispered to Anna. "How could you do this to Ethan?" "I'm sorry," Anna managed to choke out, voice laced with desperation. But she kept her eyes on the floor, as though she couldn't bear to meet anyone's gaze. I took a breath and continued my methodical approach. "Anna, you didn't just betray me. You betrayed your parents, who believed you were an honest daughter. You betrayed your sister, who looked up to you. You betrayed all of us who trusted you. And this is my final word on the matter. You might have tried to hide, but the truth is out now. There's no going back. She let out a small moan, half grief, half disbelief. I stood up, knees stiff, muscles taut. My whole body vibrated with an emotion I refused to let show. I don't need revenge, I said, looking straight at her. But you need to understand. This marriage is over. You've called down your own sentence with your lies. She made a broken, keening sound, the first real cry of the evening. Uncle William hissed under his breath. Something about a disgrace. Anna's father rose, pacing the room, fists opening and closing. Her mother dabbed at her eyes, silently weeping. Becky just shook her head, repeating, "I can't believe this," like a mantra. I turned away. My chest felt hollow, but the calm in my voice never wavered. "I'll be leaving now," I said. "Anna, you can speak to the walls or to your family, or to Michael Stone for all I care. But I won't listen to another word." The front door was only a few steps away. Each footfall echoed in my ears like a gavel striking final judgment. I grabbed my jacket from the coat rack, heart pounding but face impassive. She sprang up, stumbling over the corner of the coffee table, and reached for my arm. "Ethan, please, just..." I pulled back before she could touch me. For a moment, our eyes met. She looked utterly broken, but I felt no triumph, no pity, only the quiet devastation of a man who had seen the final piece of hope die. I turned the doorknob, stepped through, and closed it behind me, shutting out her sobbing voice. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The sky was an early evening gray, streetlights just beginning to flicker. I inhaled the cool air, letting it fill my lungs. It tasted different, like freedom wrapped in sorrow. My footsteps sounded hollow on the driveway, and I realized with startling clarity that I had no intention of coming back. I got into my car, started the engine. I didn't peel out with squealing tires. I drove away calmly, methodically, like everything else I'd done in the past few weeks. The sense of finality washed over me. I'd destroyed her carefully cultivated image. She would have to live with the consequences now. If Stone wanted her, he could have her. Whatever illusions they'd spun were crumbling in the eyes of her own family. Still, as the city lights whipped past my windows, a profound emptiness took hold in my chest. I wondered if I was supposed to cry. The man I had been, a husband, a partner, he was gone. In his place stood a cold, lonely figure who'd spent months dissecting his wife's betrayal and planning his response. I let a slow exhale slip through my lips. My tears, if any remained, felt locked behind an iron wall. I wasn't sure they would ever come. I checked into a modest motel on the outskirts of the city. The reception area had a flickering neon sign, a bored-looking clerk behind the desk. I paid for a room in cash, requested no housekeeping. The walls inside were pale yellow, the lampshades a sickly beige. I threw my jacket on the single chair and sank onto the bed, staring at the ceiling. The hum of the mini-fridge was the only sound. It was like being in limbo, caught between the life I'd known and whatever waited next. No calls came from Anna's phone for the first hour. Then a flurry of messages lit my screen. I let them go unanswered. She left a voicemail, her voice raw from crying. I listened, feeling the ice in my veins intensify. "Ethan, I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I was stupid. I don't know what I was thinking. Please come back. I'll do anything. I'll give it up. Just don't leave me like this. My parents, they won't even look at me. Please, you were always my rock. The message ended abruptly. I stared at the phone screen. The little playback bar halted at the last second. I pressed delete. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. That night, sleep didn't come easily. I paced the small room, the leftover adrenaline still burning in my limbs. My mind replayed the confrontation in detail. The father's clenched fists, the mother's tears, the shock and horror on Anna's face. Did it satisfy me? In the moment, yes, it offered a sense of closure. But in the quiet aftermath, it left a bitter aftertaste. This was not a victory. It was more like the final bell in a brutal boxing match where both fighters end up broken. Somewhere near dawn, exhaustion overtook me. I collapsed into restless slumber, haunted by dreams of her laughing in another man's arms, of me pounding on a locked door while her voice cried out from behind it. When I awoke, sunlight was streaming through the thin curtains. For the second day in a row, the morning light revealed how little I recognized my own life. I rose, showered, dressed. I grabbed my phone out of habit, ignoring a handful of missed calls. My next moves were practical. I found a new apartment complex in a different neighborhood. I didn't want to stay in motels indefinitely, and I had resources set aside. Thanks to my job, money wasn't an immediate issue. Within days, I secured a one-bedroom unit, small but functional. I canceled joint credit cards, contacted my lawyer to begin divorce proceedings, sorted out the necessary legal documents. Everything was done with quiet efficiency. Anna attempted to reach me multiple times, left tearful voicemails, even tried to show up at my workplace. I informed security she was not to be allowed in. That might have seemed harsh, but I felt it was necessary. The moment for words had passed. Her father called me once, low-voiced, apologetic, as though it were his fault. He said he was ashamed of Anna, that she'd left their home in tears, and he didn't know what else to say, but I'm sorry this happened. I told him I understood. We spoke no further. At night, alone in my new apartment, I turned on a single lamp and stared at the wall, recounting everything in my mind. A wave of something close to despair threatened to crash over me. I let it wash against that inner wall of numbness. I'd never been a man prone to tears, but I could at least admit to myself that the pain was real, that losing the life I'd built with someone, no matter how false she'd become, still cut deep. And yet each time the grief threatened to surface, the memory of that muffled hotel room moan or the text message, "You were amazing," strangled any softness in me. Maybe that was the real tragedy, that I couldn't even properly mourn because every sorrowful moment was overshadowed by disgust. Days turned into weeks. I learned to navigate life as a solitary man again. I woke early, jogged, showered, went to work, came home to my bare-walled apartment. The divorce paperwork moved forward. Anna tried everything, calling my mother, my sister, even showing up at old mutual friends' houses, begging them to intervene. They didn't. Not after I shared the evidence. She was a pariah in many circles now. Michael Stone, from what I heard, had faced repercussions at the club, though they didn't fire him. Still, the tension was high. Rumors circulated about his affair with a married woman. Some parents threatened to pull their kids from the program if he remained. He tried to reach me once, a short text that read, "Look, man, I'm sorry." I deleted it without reply. I didn't feel any joy in his downfall. It was all part of the necessary consequences. My focus was on regaining equilibrium, though it was a strange, haunted equilibrium I found. The bed felt too big at night, the silence too deep. I'd turn on the TV sometimes just for noise, but everything on screen seemed trivial compared to the storm that had raged through my life. Sometimes I'd catch myself wondering where she was sleeping that night, or if she missed me, or if she was continuing her fling with Stone. And each time, I'd shove those thoughts aside. They didn't matter anymore. People at work noticed I was quieter than usual. A colleague asked if I wanted to join a small group for after-office drinks. I declined politely. Another asked if everything was all right at home. I offered a short, vague explanation that my marriage was ending, and I didn't want to talk about it. The hush that followed told me enough, that they saw the hardness in my eyes, recognized a grief so potent it was better left untouched. One late afternoon, after I wrapped up a meeting, I found a voicemail from Anna. I hadn't blocked her number because some part of me, perhaps, needed the final proof that she had nothing left to say I wanted to hear. I pressed play, expecting more tears. Instead, I heard a subdued, trembling voice. "Ethan, I need you to know. I'm leaving the city. I can't stay here. My family barely speaks to me. People at the club whisper whenever I walk by. You got what you wanted. Just remember I did love you, in my own way. I'm sorry it came to this. There was a pause. Michael isn't in my life anymore. I wanted you to know that too. Please, take care. The message ended. I placed my phone on the desk and looked at the skyline outside my office window. A swirl of red and gold lit up the horizon as the sun set over Houston. She was leaving. That didn't spark relief or regret in me, just a sort of hollow acceptance. Everything had ended, and the echoes of our life together were fading. This was my new reality. About 2 months after the confrontation, the divorce was finalized. The papers arrived in the mail. It felt surreal to see my name and hers on official documents stating the dissolution of marriage. Our wedding date was listed as if it were a distant historical event. I signed where indicated, sealed the envelope, and dropped it in a mailbox outside a grocery store. The act took less than a minute. A decade of my life condensed to a single signature and a stamp. I walked inside that grocery store for a few supplies. Under the harsh fluorescent lights, I caught sight of couples shopping together, comparing produce, discussing dinner plans. That used to be Anna and me. My throat tightened. I reached for a carton of milk, placed it in my cart, and forced myself to move on. Step by step, minute by minute. That's how you rebuild a life. Returning to my apartment, I flicked on the TV just to drown out the hush. The news anchor reported on a local election. My gaze fell to the battered boxes in the corner, still not unpacked. I realized I'd put it off for weeks. I had clothes, a couch, a bed, but I hadn't really settled in. It felt as though I was living in transition. Suddenly, an urge to bring some order overcame me. I yanked open the boxes, rummaging through old photo frames, books, random keepsakes. A framed snapshot of Anna and me on our wedding day. Her dress shimmering in the sun, my face full of naive happiness, nearly made me freeze. I considered smashing it, but the numb part of me knew that wouldn't help. Instead, I carefully placed it in a trash bag, along with all the other remnants of our life together. I keep the memories in my head, but I saw no reason to keep physical reminders. It was a quiet purge, no ceremony, no tears, just a systematic removal of what was no longer valid. By the time I finished, the living room felt emptier, but the air felt a bit clearer too, as though I could finally breathe. I rolled the trash bag shut, tied it off, and left it by the door. The TV continued droning in the background. Voices of people debating trivial matters. I stared at the blank spaces on the walls, realizing I could do anything with them now. Hang new pictures, paint them a different color, or leave them bare. For the first time in months, I allowed myself a slow, steady exhale. There was a kernel of possibility in that silence. Maybe I could start again. I heard from my mother a few days later. She'd spoken to Anna's parents. John was still furious at Anna, and Linda was heartbroken but trying to keep the family together. Uncle William had spouted some nonsense about how young people have no morals these days. My mother just told me she hoped I was healing, that she and Dad were proud of how I handled myself. I thanked her for the concern, but we both knew I wasn't the same. Part of me had been carved out. In the weeks that followed, I immersed myself in routine. Up at 5 a.m., a jog around the block, a quick shower, a protein shake, then off to the office. I found a certain solace in the structure. On weekends, I'd either catch up on errands or bury myself in books, sometimes jog by the lakes near the city outskirts. The physical exhaustion helped me sleep without dreaming. Occasionally, memories of Anna intruded. Her laughter, the spark in her eyes when I first kissed her. That ephemeral warmth gave way to the recall of her betrayal, and the internal temperature dropped again. My face would tense, but no tears came. I had grown into the man who no longer cried over lost illusions. One evening, I ended up in a small bar near my apartment. It was dimly lit, mostly older patrons nursing beers or cocktails. The low hum of conversation and soft music formed a cocoon where I could sit unnoticed at the bar. I ordered a whiskey neat and sipped it slowly, letting the burn trail down my throat. My reflection in the bar mirror looked leaner, more guarded. The bartender gave me a polite nod, but didn't pry. I appreciated that. As I sat there, turning the glass in my hand, I realized how final everything was. This was my life now. A quiet corner in a bar, a half-empty glass, a mind haunted by the memory of a woman who once smiled like she'd set my whole world on fire. A calm acceptance pulsed through me. Maybe I wasn't entirely free of pain, but the storm had passed, leaving me to pick up the pieces of a battered landscape. And I was picking them up, one by one, in my own time. I left a tip on the bar, walked outside. The nighttime air smelled faintly of rain. My thoughts drifted to the old me. A man who believed wholeheartedly in marriage, in loyalty. Who thought Anna was the only woman he'd ever want to come home to. That man was gone. In his place stood someone who had faced betrayal and responded with an unyielding surgical finality. I almost pitied the old me. Almost. ****** Months later, a coworker approached me with some gossip about the local swimming club. Word had spread that Michael Stone was under heavy scrutiny, an official complaint from the parents of a swimmer who claimed he was inappropriate. Whether it was legitimate or not, I didn't know. He might face suspension. My coworker told me this story like it was juicy, small-town drama. I listened with polite disinterest, gave a shrug, and returned to my office. Stone's downfall brought me no satisfaction. All the energy I once invested in hating him had dissolved into a deeper, unshakable indifference. He was just another man with too much confidence and too little honor. Let him deal with the consequences. As for Anna, I heard only fragments through the grapevine. She'd moved away, possibly to a smaller city in Florida, maybe near her parents' vacation home. Some said she tried to get a fresh start, might even be working at a different gym. I suspected she was doing everything she could to rebuild her own life, just as I was. We were both casualties of the same tragedy, a marriage gutted by deceit. The difference was, I carried the truth with me like a shield. She carried her guilt, visible or not. That evening, in the silence of my apartment, I found myself drifting into reflection. I no longer burned with anger or seethed with heartbreak. It felt like standing in the aftermath of a war zone, scanning the wreckage under a gray sky. Nothing moved, nothing threatened me. Just emptiness. A lesser man might have drowned himself in alcohol or rage. I had chosen to slice out the infection, no matter how deep, and let the wound heal over. The scar would remain, but I could live with scars. Everyone has them, in one form or another. I stepped out onto my small balcony with a mug of coffee, gazing at the lights of the city. People moved about down there, living lives I'd never know. Some happy, some on the brink of heartbreak, some in love, some alone. I exhaled, letting the steam from the mug warm my face. My chest felt heavy, but stable. There was a space inside me that used to hold love for a woman I thought I understood. Now it was hollow. And that was okay. I considered the final line I'd spoken to Anna. You didn't betray a man, you called your own sentence. I wondered if she repeated those words in her mind, if they haunted her the way her whispers of pleasure in that hotel room once haunted me. Maybe she did. Maybe she didn't. That was beyond my concern now. I'd carried out my quiet retribution, though it had been more a revelation than an act of revenge. The real punishment was that no one, least of all me, would ever see her the same way again. I took another sip of coffee, the bitterness grounding me in the here and now. The night sky above seemed vast, unending. Somewhere within that star-pocked darkness, the universe reminded me how small we all are. My pain, my betrayal, my methodical exposure of her affair. Just a flicker in the grand scheme of things. But it was my flicker, my reality. And I'd faced it without looking away. With a final glance at the city below, I turned and stepped back inside. There was no grand sense of closure, no dramatic resolution, just a slow acceptance of life as it had become. Maybe in time, I'd find room for trust again. Or maybe I'd remain cautious, eyes always scanning for signs of betrayal. For now, I was content to exist in this measured calm, day by day, forging a new path. The memory of her would always be there, but like a closed door at the end of a hallway, one I didn't need to enter anymore. And so my life continued, quietly, but with a steady heartbeat of resilience. A man doesn't need to rage to prove his strength. Sometimes all it takes is the willingness to keep breathing, keep walking, and keep living when everything around you has crumbled away. Sometimes that silent perseverance is the bravest thing of all.